We usually think of history's greatest empires as the products of invincible conquerors marching across the map. But some of the most enduring foundations were laid by outcasts who had to survive absolute ruin before they could build anything at all. Take Alfred, a quiet prince who never wanted to rule 9th century Britain, and Sundiata, a disabled boy born into a tiny 13th century West African kingdom. In 871, a 22-year-old Alfred inherited a fractured kingdom and an army of farmers, just as the great heathen army arrived. Looking at the massive, terrifying scale of these Viking longships, it's clear his raw, untrained forces were severely outmatched by a ruthless war machine. Thousands of miles away and 4 centuries later, Sundiata faced a deeply personal deficit. Unable to walk until the age of 7, he crawled through the dirt while his stepmother relentlessly mocked him, passing him over for the throne that was rightfully his. These early struggles meant neither man could rely on the traditional protections of a throne. They were forced to build their authority from the ground up, starting not with power, but with the perspective of the marginalized. For Alfred, the bottom dropped out during a surprise Christmas attack. While his court celebrated unarmed, the Viking warlord Guthrum breached the hall, slaughtered the English forces, and shattered the kingdom of Wessex in a single night. The young monarch fled into the marshlands with a handful of bodyguards. The last free English king was reduced to a dirty refugee, hiding in a peasant woman's hut and getting yelled at for accidentally burning her cakes. Sundiata's political collapse was just as total. When his father died, the royal advisors refused to let a disabled boy rule. They gave the throne to his vicious stepbrother, making Sundiata an immediate target for assassination. To survive, Sundiata and his sick mother fled into the grueling African wilderness. For 7 years, they bounced from kingdom to kingdom as desperate exiles, carrying nothing but their lives. By any normal historical metric, both Alfred and Sundiata were permanently erased from the map. They had reached a point where their stories should have ended in quiet, forgotten deaths. Isolation forces a choice. Sundiata, eating from a bowl on the ground like an animal, decided he was done crawling. He ordered a blacksmith to forge a heavy iron rod. Straining every muscle in his body, the iron bending under his weight, he pulled himself up and stood on his own 2 feet for the very first time. Staring into the same fire that burned the peasant woman's cakes, Alfred stopped mourning the brothers he'd lost and the kingdom he'd failed. He realized that if he survived the swamp, he could survive the Vikings. Both men used their time in exile to gather strength. Sundiata joined the military in the neighboring kingdom of Mema, using his newfound physical strength to become a fierce, respected warrior. Meanwhile, Alfred secretly sent messengers slipping through the English countryside, calling on any surviving farmers and merchants to grab their weapons. Their time at rock bottom served as a tactical retreat. Stripped of wealth and status, they learned how to build genuine loyalty and leverage from absolute zero. Alfred's gamble culminated at a rendezvous point called Egbert Stone. He rode there terrified that no one would answer his call. Instead, he crested the hill to the roar of 4,000 armed men, ready to fight for their homeland. Sundiata experienced his own reckoning when merchants from his homeland tracked him down in Mema. They fell to their knees, begging him to return and save their people from Sumaro, a tyrant who had violently seized control of the region in Sundiata's absence. With his peasant army assembled, Alfred marched to the Battle of Edington. Leading from the front lines in brutal melee combat, he finally broke the will of the Viking warlords and forced them to retreat. Sundiata answered his people's call and rallied a massive coalition of exiles and allied kingdoms. At the Battle of Kiruna, he commanded this unified force to completely crush Sumaro's army. These victories were the direct result of their time in the shadows. Years spent as outcasts gave them the language to reach a broken, leaderless population and convince them that a single, unified strike was their only path to survival. Winning a war is entirely different from building a lasting peace. Because they had survived the destruction of their homes, both leaders understood exactly what a resilient society needed to look like. When Guthrum surrendered, Alfred practiced a radical form of mercy. Instead of executing the Viking warlord, he required Guthrum to be baptized and established a strict border treaty. Surprisingly, the Viking honored the agreement, securing Wessex from southern invasion. With the border secure, Alfred focused on structural defense and culture. He built the first English navy and launched a massive literacy campaign, translating texts from Latin into Old English to forge a single, unified Anglo-Saxon identity. Sundiata moved beyond the borders of his father's tiny kingdom, unifying the formerly fractured West African territories into the vast, centralized Mali Empire. In doing so, he took on a title that matched the scale of his achievement, Mansa, the King of Kings. Looking at this 14th century map, known as the Catalan Atlas, we can see the generational success of Sundiata's system. The illustration features his descendant, Mansa Musa, holding a solid gold coin, a direct result of the immense economic foundation Sundiata laid. Living as helpless refugees gave both men the precise empathy and strategic vision needed to design indestructible empires that would long outlive them. A disabled boy forced to eat in the dirt and a traumatized prince hiding in a swamp redrew the geopolitical maps of their continents. History remembers these incredible ascensions through the permanent titles they earned: Sundiata, the Lion King, and Alfred, the only English monarch to ever be named the Great. History's most enduring empires are built using the debris of a leader's lowest moments. Alfred and Sundiata show that reaching absolute zero can be a source of strength, providing the specific clarity needed to build something that lasts centuries.